Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Welcome to another show. I'm very excited today to have Damian on the show. Damian is an amazing online coach, speaking from personal experience. Damian retired from cycling after winning the National Mountain Bike Championships in 1998. After experiencing a world outside of cycling, such as finishing a psychology degree, I believe, even releasing a hip-hop album, he started racing again. Like all pros do, they come back. Damian went from not finishing C-grade crits in 2007 to the top 10s in A-grade in 2009, winning the B-grade club championship and top 10s in the open category for mountain bike marathons. So Damian attributes his cycling success to having a coach, optimizing his life around training, and getting focused on recovery and nutrition. I'm dying to talk to you, Damian, about all of those things. So firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Ali.
You said you attribute your personal cycling success to your coach. So obviously you're a big believer in coaches, and you being a coach yourself. Who needs a coach and why?
I will start with the reason that I'm a big fan of coaches, and I was brought into the sport through coaching and through very good coaching. So from the beginning, my introduction to cycling was through coaches. They taught me everything I needed to know about the training, about skills on the bike, and sort of racecraft and things as well. So that was my introduction, and I was an absolute beginner. I was very young. I was 13, 14 years old, and they kind of guided me through that process. So this has really shaped the way that I approach cycling, and then how I try to bring that to the people that I'm trying to help come into cycling. So the people that need a coach fall into a few different categories. They start with the absolute beginners. So people that have no idea can really benefit from any type of guidance, whether that is training or racecraft or riding in a bunch, all these things that are kind of neglected a little bit when you get going. Someone just guiding you through that process can really help. The other people that would really benefit from a coach are people that just need a little bit of guidance, where they just are at a point in their cycling where maybe they're plateaued, or they just need someone to help them to get to that next step. That can come in the form of structured training or just a bit of an idea of what they're doing wrong or whatever. And something I do want to say here, which is really important, is that not everybody needs a coach. Some people don't work well with coaches, and personality clashes, or they don't have the time to sort of sit down and go through the process with a coach. So not everybody will benefit from the relationship of a coach. And when thinking about whether you need one yourself, you really need to identify, am I that type of person? Because I've had people come on board where they've thought, okay, I need a coach, or someone's convinced them or whatever, and they've joined up, but it hasn't worked. For whatever reason, they haven't followed a program, they haven't been able to communicate effectively, or they haven't communicated at all, and then it sort of all falls away. So that's an important thing to mention as well, that you don't always need a coach to solve every problem, but there's definitely certain people that will benefit from having a coach.
That's a good point you make. So how would you know if a coach is going to work for you? Like, assuming you got the right coach, but how do you know whether you're going to be able to handle having a coach?
I think you have to look inside yourself and ask yourself, can I do it? Because in some aspects of life, if you're very used to controlling everything you do regarding your sport and even outside of sport, then someone coming in and telling you what to do, maybe you don't handle that so well. So you need to look within yourself. Can you take guidance from somebody? Can you respect somebody enough that you will listen to what they say and then follow that process? Are you able to slowly go through that process and trust it sometimes without getting a result, or being deep down in dismay because you just don't actually know where you're going, or you can't handle exactly the information being told to you?
I like that word that you use then, trust. I think that's the key. You actually have to put your trust in the person, because like you said, day to day or even week to week, you might not know whether you're on the right sort of track, but you need to trust the coach.
Yeah, trusting the coach is very tightly linked to just trusting the process, because what you're buying into when you're getting a coach is you're buying into their philosophy, their experience of going through that process before with other people, and how they can adjust the course for you specifically. So in the end, you get the results that you both want.
You've decided, yep, I've got this event coming up. I really feel like I'm plateauing. I need to take myself to the next level, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it by myself. Plus, I'm not 100% sure that I can write the program that I need to get me there. I know I need a coach. Say I heard of a few people that are meant to be quite good. What questions would I ask in order to know, yep, that's the right coach for me?
We could go off into the technical aspects of things. We can go off into the science side of things. But I think the best place to start is definitely with, do you just get on with the person? Do you want to hang out with them? Do you want to listen to them, be on phone calls? You'll be spending a lot of time with this person, whether it is a online relationship or in person sometimes. So that basic fundamental part of it is, do you get on with this person? Some people may disagree with that because all you want is the information, and that information, put it into action, and then hopefully you get results. But I see that it's all sort of tied in together, and you want to have fun through the process as much as anything. So do you get on with that person? And then you can look at their philosophy as to whether that aligns with what you want to do, whether they have the experience, whether they've done what you want to do before themselves or they've trained other people to do that. I think that's really important. And then you can look at the other side of that, the technical aspect. How do they train with the technical side of things? Do they use power meters, heart rate monitors, or whatever? And is this some equipment that you have or you're willing to go and get in order to fit into their system?
So how do you train then?
The style that I have, I find it a bit hard to describe, but I would lean on the side of what I sort of call smart training, where you want to be consistent. Consistency is a big thing for me, but you want to have a specific training load that is based around everything that you do in order to make sure that you're progressing all the way up to the event. So I believe in a linear program. We're progressing in a linear fashion, and we're just adding more and more and more until we get to the event. So that's the sort of the main part of the coaching.
So when you say linear in terms of adding more, do you mean more volume or more intensity?
Both. So moving along from anything that is low intensity and then moving closer and closer to high intensity that matches the actual race. So the specificity of the effort that's required to do well in the race. So moving from very general to very specific, and that also means moving from very general fitness to very specific fitness, and intensity kind of follows that same path. The other parts that I kind of work with is accountability. So accountability to yourself, to the coach, to the team, to the other people that are sort of invested in the progress that you want to make. So being sure that you're actually accountable for that. I like getting that message out there so people take responsibility when they don't do training, so then they can, or they take responsibility when they do it. So then when they've got some results or whatever, they can be the ones that feel like they've made the steps to get themselves successful. The other parts of it just fall under general kind of education. I really like people understanding where they're at and the information that I'm giving them. They can go away and do it for themselves at some point. I think that's really important. Understand yourself and your adaptations to training, as well as the training you're doing, plus all the smaller sort of things in cycling, the nuance of cycling, the art of cycling, I think. That's basically the core components of what I do for coaching. Outside of that, just general things like endurance training. I'm a big supporter of endurance training. Functional strength, I believe functional strength plays a big part of it. And like you said, science as well, and the technology that kind of goes along and enables us to analyze rides is really important as a tool for me.
So how do you use those tools, and what tools do you choose?
I've been using a lot of different tools to kind of get to this point now. But if I break it down into the technology that I like the most, it's definitely power meters, my number one tool that I use for training. They just open up a whole new world of analysis, and it changed my cycling, and I believe it changes everybody's cycling once they get to look at those numbers. So power meters, coupling that with Training Peaks and WKO4. WKO4 has had some slow evolutions over the last year or so, which has really meant that it's a really valuable tool for digging into the important parts of training to see what is actually progressing in real world terms, what numbers are actually changing, what's happened in training at a deeper level, so we can make adjustments so the end result is actually more effective. But that's basically it. Outside of that, of course, there's all these other things, aero advantages and all things, but that's all straight up performance wise. And that doesn't actually help the input of training and trying to get an adaptation for the person themselves rather than the equipment that they're on.
But that helps you set a training session because you base the training session around a certain percentage of FTP or something like that. Is that how you use power?
Yeah, for the prescriptions for the workouts.
And you mentioned Training Peaks, and that's quite a popular one for coaches to use and is getting more and more advanced. You also mentioned WKO4. What exactly is that, just for our listeners?
So WKO4 is a desktop piece of software that links to Training Peaks, that pulls all the data away from Training Peaks, it pulls it through and dumps it in there, and it enables you to just go a little bit deeper. And there's a whole bunch of algorithms that are being used to kind of look at this data in a different way. And you can set it up. It's very customizable, and you can set it up for your workflow. And me as a coach, I can set it up the way I like to work, so I can look at things a little bit deeper. An example of kind of the things that are being used in there, there's algorithms to figure out the percentage of VO2 max that you're utilizing on any given ride or any interval, which is really useful because it's a very important part of cycling. They're also modeling the FTP, the functional threshold power. They're actually modeling that, so it can give you an idea of what type of training will change your FTP without having to go and test for it. So it's just looking at things a little bit deeper. And I really would say that the technology out there at the moment, there's nothing like WKO4. The people behind it that are working behind it, there's nothing like that out there in the cycling industry at the moment.
And so do your clients need to understand to that level, or are you happy for them not to? Like, how often do you discuss the intricacies of the FTP over the time and that sort of thing?
Generally, when somebody will ask me, I'll have the time to explain it to them. Outside of that, like I said, education is an important part of it, but only if it's useful. Some people are so busy, they just want the program, but the program in isolation doesn't necessarily help. I think what helps for me is wrapping up a program in information and context so that somebody can see why they're doing something on the day, is building towards the event that they want to do.
As a client, do we need to know the intricacies of the numbers and how they all work, or can we just go by, you tell me what I need to do and I'll do it?
As a client, it comes down to each individual person as how much information they actually need to get something done. Somebody will request more and more information if they need it for motivation because they need to understand the context. Other people may just want to have the ride in front of them. They don't have time to think about it, but they can still get through a session, so they don't need it. I feel like there's a minimum maybe that people need in order to understand where they're going, but it really depends on each person.
And I noticed too with your training, you sort of look at the scores such as the fatigue score and the TSS score and that sort of thing. What sort of metrics do you look at in terms of, I guess they would be sort of classed as health metrics?
In some ways, there's no life TSS just yet, unfortunately. So it's hard to get a complete picture of somebody. I've played around with different things like heart rate variability and also just looking at having a general fitness tracker as well. These kind of things will possibly in the future give us an idea of what's happening overall, because that's what health is. It's not just the time that you're on the bike, it's all of the time. But the things like TSS and anything that's in the performance management chart, like CTL and ATL, there's chronic training load and acute training load. These give an idea of where an athlete is at when they jump on the bike, potentially how much fatigue they're carrying or not carrying, how much fitness they have or they don't have. But they're very general numbers. You can make up a CTL number with junk, with absolute whatever types of riding, and it'll give you a number, and you can say, okay, I'm at 120, for example. I should be really fit, but you might not have very specific fitness to what you need, or it's just a general overview of what I'm looking at. Digging into the other numbers kind of gives me a better idea of where someone's at and what they're really capable of.
But presumably you don't want your clients to go over a particular number of stress score in a particular week. Is that sort of how you use that? So you sort of go, well, this ride is worth about.
Yeah, when I sit down and go through and try and plan out the period up to their main A race or whatever, I will put down, in theory, what an athlete could get to on say, a weekly TSS score, what their maximum number would be and how that progression, because like I was saying before, that progression is really important to manage that progression. You're carefully nudging that overload, but you're not going too far into overtraining. So that becomes, I've had athletes, and if anyone knows numbers, I've had athletes that can sit comfortably at, say, minus 80 training stress balance, which is very, very low. But then they can back up and they can do rides over and over again, where I've had other ones that struggle at minus 20. So it's a very individual response, and figuring out where that individual is going to be able to recover best and then come back and do the training. It takes a little bit of time to kind of see some patterns. But in general terms, the only real numbers that I'll look for when doing the planning in that first place is I look for this window. It's like I call it the neutral zone, and it's from minus 10 TSB to plus 10 TSB. And when somebody is having a rest week or at the end of a season or whatever, I try and bring them into that neutral zone, ideally right up close to plus 10 so they can feel as fresh as possible before we dive back into another big block and then just their TSB is going to go way back down again to whatever it is. But definitely it's an individual thing.
And I guess this is where, for me, I think a coach is great, because then you've got someone there who monitors that. Although you might be going, yeah, I feel okay. And it's very hard to monitor that yourself, unless you love numbers like you and want to do that. But it's really great to have that guidance. And on that point, that being told, yes, you can recover today, and this is actually your rest day. How important is recovery and rest?
For me, as a coach, recovery is sort of my main job. All the adaptions are happening when somebody is resting. The people that approach me generally, like if you hire a coach, you want to train. Your whole aim is to train. And so my job as a coach generally is holding people back and then telling them to rest and recover and trying to prove to them that actually works. That's kind of the end point that I'll try and get to. But rest and recovery is a challenge for some people. Some people can't sit still, can't take a day off even. But if you can kind of get the message through that this is where the adaptions are actually happening, this is where your body actually is starting to prepare itself. And if you go through the process of properly resting and recovering at the point where your body needs it, that sort of point changes as well. And that's very individual as well. Then the gains after that are going to be far greater.
Well, just to sort of recap, my personal experience having you as a coach was quite amazing. So coming all the way back to how did you choose a coach? I listened to your podcast and really liked your philosophy, the way you spoke about writing and just where your head was at with everything. And that was the reason why. And plus I knew by listening to you the way you measured performance, and that was the way I chose you. And then moving on from there, the way you train your clients by giving that information to them and also being there if they want to go in and ask more. You've got the answers. You prove that you know what you're doing, which for me was the hardest thing, was trusting you. It took me a while and several emails, and you probably never received so many emails in your life. And then all of a sudden, as you mentioned, the emails sort of stopped, and then you could probably see, I'm not sure on your end whether you could see, oh, she finally trusts me. Did you have a sense of that?
So to sort of go through, like just explain the process from my side of it, initially I would definitely say that when you approached me for coaching, that I believe that you were going to fall on the side of someone that wouldn't necessarily take coaching so well. And only because you're so active. You don't need motivation to get out the door and do things. This is how, I don't know, how you've been for as long as whatever. And so involving somebody in that process is complicated, because then I'm telling you when, you can and can't do things. And you're very active outside of cycling as well. So I think we discussed very early, I was like, ideally we should cut out everything but the cycling. If not, let's just do that a couple of weeks before the event or whatever. And that was kind of the compromise that I was looking at when I'm kind of putting together the plan of how to get you to the race in the best shape. That was kind of the start of it. But then it was pushing you outside of the comfort zone when we started getting into the intensity a little bit. And that was when you were contacting me a lot, just voicing your concerns of what was happening, and you were very unsure about how things were going to work or whatever. I just knew at some point that you were going to get through it, and you did, because in the end, that communication stopped. It came back to feedback. This is what happened. This is how the ride went or whatever. There wasn't the insecurity about the process and things. All of a sudden, for whatever clicked in you, and it wouldn't have just been the riding, it would have been just the way you're approaching it or whatever, then something just clicked and then just back to normal. And we're just back to just putting out workouts and you're just getting them done, which is the best outcome, really.
Yeah, and I think another reason why I realised that I needed a coach was because I don't like being told what to do, and I know that I won't work on my faults unless I've got someone telling me to do them. It's like anyone, you always do what you love doing, and you never really work on the things that you need to work on unless you're being made to. So I knew I needed someone to make me concentrate on riding flats and getting fast in sprints and all the things that I hate. So very appreciative of that. Unfortunately, couldn't do the race because of my bike crash last week, but that's okay. As a coach then, do you feel that you've changed at all?
I've been coaching now officially for a bit over 5 years, I think it is. And in that time, I have changed in the way that I just approach things overall. When I first started, I was hyper-focused on all these small little details and all these little things that I thought that were really important, because at the time they were really important to me in my personal journey and sort of sorting my things out. That was when I sort of came back the second time and I was trying to optimize my life around working full time and trying to get the best out of myself. I was focused on these really small things and I thought that would carry over. But what I've found is that I've let go of all these small things and now I'm looking for bigger trends. So the way that I approach my coaching now is just looking for the bigger trends and only diving in when it's absolutely necessary or when I know it's important. And so it's understanding the process of how to get somebody in the best shape, but also looking at the trends over time of what's happening to that person and things. I think that's been the greatest change outside of just normal sort of technical and coaching practice, kind of just leveling up as far as education and things goes.
When you're looking at that, do you look at a client as a whole? So do you take into consideration their lifestyle? You mentioned that by one of your reasons for success were that you optimize your life around training. Do you take into consideration much the life of the client outside of training and also in terms of nutrition as well?
To be honest, right now, there is only small parts of someone's life outside of cycling that I will take into consideration when going through the planning process. I will look at the basic things of how much time they have for training, what are their windows of opportunity, who's their support network, what are their goals, what do they do outside of cycling, and how can that affect their cycling. These are the main questions that I try and get an understanding of when somebody comes on board. I want to start incorporating more and more of being more health focused or more whole in my approach. It gets to a point with an individual, if someone's having trouble training or any types of trouble getting through sessions or whatever, then we have to do a bit of a deep dive into what's happening, and a lot of times the answer is outside of cycling. But I'd like to go in from the start looking at how can we actually optimize this person, not only for what they want in the short term, but let's look at the long term of how we can actually change certain habits and things so they can be better off. And even if I'm not there as a coach, I can leave them in a better place so they can continue to sort of develop and just get better overall. It's a pretty lofty goal though, when essentially you're only spending, 1 to 3 hours a week per person looking at their information and talking to them or whatever. But I think if I have this idea in my head that this is the place that I want to go, then slowly I'll be sort of collecting information that I will find useful, that I think that I can pass on to the people that I coach.
It sounds like you and I are on a very similar path. I mean, Ali Fitness is all about bringing health into fitness. Do you think that you can have high-level performance and health? Are they mutually exclusive?
I honestly think that it's a spectrum with performance on one end and sort of health down the other end somewhere. I haven't been clearly able to see somebody that's at the top of their game that is what I would say 100% healthy. It's kind of a quest that personally I'm looking for, not necessarily to be the best of the best, but to have a high level of performance, but also consider myself healthy. The big thing that I see is that to be healthy, you don't need to do as much exercise that someone does on a bike or any other pursuit if they're doing it and they're fairly serious about it. So this is the big challenge, how can you maintain everything in your life to remain healthy? And that's not just sort of physical exercise, it's relationships and everything that you need to stay connected. How can you do all of that plus be really fast on a bike? And I don't know, I just don't have the answer just yet.
Bummer. I was hoping you'd give us all the answer. That's okay. And I don't think anyone does. And it's great that people are starting to think about that. Just in your experience with people you've perhaps competed with or even people you've coached, you obviously know a lot of fit people. What percentage or how many of these people would you consider healthy? And looking at their nutrition, what are you basing that on?
I'd say a very low percent. It's only a bit of a guess, though, because all I'm looking at is the outside and then the small kind of lifestyle indicators and factors that I would know about a person. And especially people that I coach, I'm not 100% sure exactly what goes into their mouth, for example. So it's a bit hard for me to tell. I don't know, it's a tricky one. Like, definitely people present as healthy, but for me, it's kind of things like having levels in any blood work that you have done, that they're in healthy ranges, that you are eating well. And eating well is a bit of a loaded way to say it because eating well means different things to different people. Just to go back to the question, the percentage I think is quite low. The indicators I look for are people have to have a clear understanding of where the sport of cycling fits into their life, and then how does that affect everyone around them, and then how does too much of it affect them, and how can they back off and things. See, this is where I think that health and performance is this spectrum, because you can't always be healthy when you're chasing performance, because there are times that you need to compromise certain things, and whether that is diet, sleep, or whatever, especially if you've got a full life and you're doing a lot of other activities or even working outside, it becomes very difficult to do that. So I think there's a lot of room for people to be healthy or change small habits and move in that direction, especially for the time that they're going to stop being competitive and they need to figure out a way to maintain some form of exercise to help them be healthy.
You're almost saying then to get that balance, you sort of need to go out of balance for certain times of performance, but then come back into balance?
It's the awareness of what's actually happening in your life and sort of readjusting when you need to readjust. There's different times you need to be out of balance. If you need to focus 100% on something, there is a place for that in life, I believe. But there's also a place for pulling that back and going in the other direction to kind of compensate for where you've been. And that's where moving between health and performance is possibly an answer here.
I guess it comes back to what's your motivation? Is it to be healthy and fit for a long period of time, like that longevity sort of look, or do you just want to win this next race and that's really all you care about?
Yeah, the why. It always comes back to the why, doesn't it? I think the why is the tricky one, because maintaining or adjusting to different motivations over a lifetime is one of the biggest challenges, but I think it's one of the most important things in order to keep something in your life like cycling.
I think we'll leave it on that note. That's a really good point. And Damian, I'm very thankful for your time today, and we're going to link to your podcast and website. But before we let you go today, I've got a question that we actually ask all our guests. It's slightly random and nothing to do with coaching or cycling. Do you have a tattoo?
Yes, I do.
Oh, what is it?
It's a small 5-pointed star on my back.
Okay.
At the top of my back, below my neck, yeah.
So what does it mean and why did you get it?
I got it in 2003, 14 years ago. It was just, for me back then, just representing the year that I had. It was kind of like it was my lucky star, because that was a pretty pivotal year for me. I'd had some lows and I kind of got over them and I was moving in a better direction and things. So yeah, so I got the tattoo. So it's still there.
You said that like with a bit of resentment or not?
No resentment. But like it's definitely, it represents a different time in my life, which is cool, because that's what life is. It's all different stages and things that you go through, and that was one, but I didn't get a tattoo that I regret at all. So I'm happy with it.
Excellent. Was that around the same time as the hip hop album came out?
That was just before.
Ah, right. Sounds like an interesting year. Do you want to lead us out with some hip-hop music?
Absolutely not. We'll leave that, back there, I think.
No problem. Thank you very much for today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me, Ellie.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.